Welcome to our next lecture in our search lecture series on new tendencies in Southeast Asian architecture. So we had already 3 very exciting guests, 2, right? And today we're very happy to welcome a local architect from Singapore, Yuen Hong from Ipli Architects. Yuen Hong, he started at NUS because he couldn't start at SUTD yet, right? Because it didn't exist yet. He worked at kind of numerous offices before, like a mom name like William Lim, who probably most of you know, and but also like HDB. And he won like I guess all the prizes that anybody can win in Singapore from the SIA and various other design prizes actually. So very happy to welcome you today, and so let's give him a welcome.
Thank you very much. I think I'll just stand behind the podium. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity for me to present to you. This is a picture of my office. Now, Ipli Architects, actually Ipli is actually started by me and my wife. That's why it's Ipli. I'm Yip, Lee is my wife. We started actually in 2001. Now, when we first started the company in 2001, that was the time, I guess it was a time when we actually started to feel as if we wanted to do our own thing. And it's also a time where we started to question what we are doing, you know, as a Singaporean born in Singapore, designing in Singapore. So it was about the right time. So that's actually why we started the company. And it's also, we were always quite aware that we want to be part of the world, but to be somehow sort of questioning as to where we come from, whether there's such a thing as being a Singaporean, what does it mean, you know? So all these questions are actually going through our mind when we actually started this company. So, right? So let me see, where's this is my wife, right? This is actually my staff, right? Now, the title of this, no, before we go any further, I mean, what I wanted to say is that when we, you know, Ipli we don't have any big, high ideals, you know, philosophy about saving the world and whatsoever. Most of our ideas are actually very, very straightforward, very, very simple. And in fact, most of the ideas that will come out are actually very sort of problem-solving initiatives. Nothing spectacular, right? But today's topic is actually a search for the Southeast Asian architecture. Now, when I was told about this title, then I was like scratching my head and I'm saying that, you know, this is one of those titles that are, you know, everybody can easily say it and you can actually write it, but it'll probably take a whole lifetime to ponder, and a whole lifetime to wonder, you know, figure out what it actually means. So it's actually a very, very difficult question, almost impossible, I find. And I mean, so for today, I'm only just going to share with you some of the ideas that sort of propel our work. And there are no sort of strategies for some solutions to this search for Southeast Asian architecture whatsoever, right? So now all I can share with you is also, a little bit of the influences that sort of governed me as I grew up and as when I went through school, and these are the things that sort of I always found interesting, and these are the things that actually helped me work out some of the projects that are being presented later. So now, if you look at this, this is actually a shop house. Now, I grew up in one of these shop houses in Chinatown till I was about 12 years old. Now, this shop house in Chinatown has 3 stories. Each story has about 8 families. So we're talking about 24 families in one shop house. And if you take an average of about 4 or 5 people in one family, you're talking about 100 to 120 people in one shop house in Chinatown. And that's how I grew up. Now, when you look at the shop houses now in Singapore, when you look at them, you see all these beautiful shop houses with the koi ponds, with the golden retriever, and you know, and a posh park at the outside whatsoever. When I was growing up, the shop house that we stayed in, it's really run down. The ventilation is really bad because it's all partitioned up like a rabbit warren, you know, to house all these families. So every floor we would have a kitchen at the back, and a toilet, and 8 families would share that for each floor. So it is quite crummy. And also at that time when I was growing up, we still had the bucket system. I don't know whether you all know what the bucket system is, meaning there's no sewage system. The sewage system is one guy comes in the early morning, carries away the bucket that all the 8 families had deposited, whatever, the day before. Very, very ecological, don't you think so? But that's how we lived. And all the families would actually cook in the kitchen behind. So growing up in a shop house like this is actually like a little village for me. It's my whole world. Because at that age we hardly go out. You know, we stay in there. So in that village we would have old and young people, nice people, quite bad people, ladies of the night, all staying in this shop house. So that's how I grew up. So the shop, you know, the air wells that you see nowadays is not the source of beautiful light that we know. It used to be my only salvation to whatever, and my reprieve, you know, to whatever light and air there is, you know, for my family, you know. So that's how I grew up. Now my grandmother used to stay in one of this what we call a tap house, a kampong house in Geylang somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but it's in Geylang. Now, these houses are beautiful to me in the sense that they this big roof tropicality. The big roof takes away the rain and keeps the sun away. Now, they're all built on stilts. They're built on stilts, and the ventilation is fantastic because the air will flow below. The living quarters is actually upstairs, and the livestock, or the pigs and the chickens are actually all on this level. Now, to me, these houses are quite beautiful because the scale of these houses are very small. They are all human. To me, they are all very human proportion. For the simple fact that they are all built by men and not by machines. Now, traditionally, when building these houses, the standard of measure is actually by hand. How many hands? It's not like your feet and inches or meters and centimeters, but how many hands of this? Basically, it's for 2 men to be able to carry a column and erect the column. So it has to be of a size that is big enough for men to handle. So that's why actually the scale is actually so small and so intimate for human habitation, because it's of this kind of scale, you see. And of course, whatever they use, actually, most of it is actually from the land, the wood, you know, and mostly the timber. So, I mean, this is what I actually enjoyed tremendously too. Now, of course, now whatever I'm saying, of course, is that not as if it's when I was a young kid I could actually appreciate all these things. At that time, I hated it because it was so terrible. But now as you grow older, when you actually look back at it, and this is actually how you grew up, you actually appreciate all these things a lot more. Because there are a lot because there are lots of clever things in all these houses. You know, the air well for the ventilation, and the big roofs where where the heat is not trapped, because the heat, when it actually goes up to the roof, actually get sort of vented away by all these screens on the side. So that's all this clever technology, simple technology that we actually try to use and then and put in our houses, right? So, and also at the time, of course, we are the poor people, so we are always standing across the fence looking at all these big, what we call the Singapore houses, owned by all the Tauke's and everybody, and black and white houses, the legacy from the British. I mean, what is beautiful about these houses is that they exude, emotionally they exude this sort of relaxed grandeur and sort of old world charm, you know, which I found quite fascinating. And they adapted all these houses with the big roof and the deep verandas for our weather. So in that sense, even when they transport the whole thing, it's not just a direct transportation. It is an adaptation for our weather, right? So these are the things that, simplistically, these are the things that actually influence me, and the work that we actually do from then on, actually try and capture all the cleverness of all these houses, and then we just translate all these little ideas into our houses, right? So this is one of the houses that I built very early on. This was done actually in 2006. Now, this house is actually, well, if you can tell, is actually inspired by the Kampong Atap house. The house is actually built on 6 columns, so it's actually raised on stilts. It has a very big roof. Now the roof is actually about 2-meter overhang to really throw away the rain and shelter the house from the sun. But the thing about this house is actually the scale is actually a very, very low scale. The floor to floor height is only about 3.15 exactly, mainly because the client has a limited budget. So I wanted to keep the scale as low as possible, because when you build taller and higher, all your doors and everything gets taller and taller, and then the cost rises exponentially. And also the air conditioning load and whatsoever also increases. So this house is actually a 3.15, exactly 18 rises. Now when I proposed this to the client is a German guy, 6'3". So he says, like, no way, you know, it's too low for me. So, but what I did was actually, I did a flat slab system. So eventually what is happening is also, at this height is actually a 2.9 clearance, but where the toilets are, I actually stack the toilets on top of each other, so that for those areas, the ceiling can actually be lower. But the clear height is actually 2.9. I could still put in a decent fan, but so I told him that as long as you don't put a kid on your shoulder, I think you're actually okay. See? So, but this is actually how we actually designed the house, very, very low scale. So because of budget reasons, right, so, now if you look at the first floor, actually when the first floor is actually very open, same as the kampong houses, basically because we want the view to the, you know, if you look at, this is the living room. When you sit in the living room, actually you get a view all around the whole compound. So that when you're inside the house, it's not really just within the confines of the 4 walls. Actually, you actually feel the land also. So that's the idea of opening the ground floor up. Previously, like I said, the tropic house, the ground floor is actually for the livestock. So, but in this case, because it's a living room and dining room, it can actually afford to be a bit more open. So people actually look in, so it's still quite acceptable to me. But when you go upstairs, where the bedrooms are, then it actually becomes a bit more solid. What I did here was actually, to keep the cost down also, was that if you look at all these windows are actually staircase timber treads. Now, I happened to chance upon this timber treads at the lumber yard, because when we went to the yard, I noticed that the factory would actually cut standard pieces of 8 feet long and 300 wide timber pieces to make them into staircases. So instead of like a regular, getting a contractor to build a timber frame and then put in the glass, then put in all the ironmongery, so the labor costs were actually quite high. So I thought, why don't we just actually use a somewhat proprietary system, a standard module system, and actually make them into windows. So that's exactly what I did. So these are actually exactly 2.4 meters tall. So they're standard sizes, but and then we just the contractor just need to fit in all the hinges, and then we actually managed to create all these windows. Now, in Singapore, a lot of the houses on the second floor, a lot of people want it to be glass all around, and to me that is quite stupid, because first of all, it's a bedroom. You want the privacy, and you don't want to be cooked alive, in our kind of weather, in our kind of heat. So actually, all you need is 2 slivers of glass left and right for you to tell whether it's day or night. And these windows are actually only open in the daytime when you actually need to air the place a little bit. Most of the time at night, you will close everything up, curtain everything up, and go to sleep. So why do we actually need so much glass on the upper floor? Now, this is also done on the left and right, so that it's actually, when we actually open the windows, you can actually just put your hands out and clean the glass. And you don't have to sort of erect a scaffolding to go up to, when the glass gets too big, you can't reach it. Then you always got to erect a scaffolding or have a tall ladder to climb up and clean it. So all these considerations to me, it makes the house a lot more sort of a human scale, intimate and manageable in that sense. So even on the second floor, actually there's a little courtyard, within this, I don't know where there's a second floor plan. Yeah, on the second floor plan, there are little courtyards, for all the little spaces. Right. This picture shows, for instance, on site, what happened was that, now this is a time where the steel rod wasn't very, very expensive. It was actually very cheap at this point in time, before the China market actually sucked up everything. So the contractor actually was going to throw all this away. So what we did was actually we took all the steel rods and created the fencing for the house. So, and then just planted this lalang and sort of the lalang and the steel rods actually complemented each other, because when they move in the wind, they sort of they look compatible, and especially when they get more and more rusty, it actually became the color of that lalang, right? So this was a house that was actually done in 2006, right? Sorry, I keep going. This one, 26 Cable Road, is actually a much bigger version of the Sunset Place house. That house was actually designed with 6 columns. This one was actually designed with 12 columns. This is a much bigger site. Now, the idea is actually the same idea. It's actually a house on stilts. Right. But if you look at it, it's actually just a basic rectangle on the second floor, the 12 columns. Now, at this point in time, if you remember, if I talked about the Kampong tap house. Now, previously, traditionally, what happens is that, a young couple get married, they have just about enough money to build their first house. So usually they'll just build the first rectangle or square, because that's all they can afford. And then as they grow older and they earn more money, then they will start to add on to the existing house. So what we call like an architectural accretion, so that the main body is there, and then they add on all these little parts to it, to like a parasitic kind of situation. And then that's how they add on to the house. And that's actually gives the charm to these attap kampong houses. So in this house, is exactly what I did. I mean, the basic shape is actually a rectangle, but then what happened was that I added the balcony, the outdoor kitchen, right? The private little garden for the mother. Then even the little toilet, the powder room is actually outside the house. So all these little parts are actually adding on to the main square that sort of help to sort of create this little language of the attap house. So that's how this house came about. Now the other thing is also, in Singapore, when we actually build houses of this size, the cost is usually very, very exorbitant. And one of the main criteria of building in Singapore is actually, a lot of times, is how much it's going to cost. And we have to always keep the costs down. So my contention is that when we actually, now this house is actually designed a very, very strict grid, which is 8 meters and a 6-meter grid. Very, very regimental in that sense. So when it is very, very clear like this, to me, when the contractor looks at a plan like this, then he will say, "Oh, it's quite easily doable. Nothing fancy. It's not like it's not like there's a building that curves here and there." So when the contractor looks at a project like this, first thing to do is they actually put in a 20% contingency because they're not sure how it's going to end. Because he's not sure the architect has resolved everything. So the cost goes up even before you actually start on site. So when you actually design like this, it's actually quite good for the contractor. He looks at it, oh, this is like a no-brainer. 6 meters by 8 meters, I can do this, So, but my other contention also is that even though it's very rigid and very regular like this, it doesn't mean that it needs to be a boring spaces. It can still be quite interesting. I mean, to me, it's quite interesting. It's for you to judge, but this is what I come up with a very, very regular grid, right? So this is the second house that I did. This is done in this house won us a President Design Award in 2011. Yeah. So now then, for the Sunset Place house, the first house, and for the strategies for those houses, basically, what I did in this project was I put an amalgamation of all those little houses, and I put them together, I actually get this development. This is in Wharton Estate. Basically, it's 59 units of strata housing. But the strategy of each of the houses is actually like this. It's a low habitable, private house on the top, supported on stilts. So, but in Singapore, when we actually built in the Wharton Estate, is actually a very prized, high-end residential area. We really have to pack it in so that it's viable, economically viable for the developer. So, if you look at it, it looks terribly regimental. Yeah, and there's a reason for it too, because we have to put in the car park underneath. So the car park has to take care of the driveway, and you can't have all this running all over the place, because then your transfer structure would be crazy. It would be very, very expensive. So how do you create a nice environment when you have to pack it in like this? So basically, what we did was we actually stagger a little bit on the plan. Doesn't have to be too much, so the transfer of the structure is not too crazy. And then create a lot of little back alleys and backwater streams, to create a little village-like kind of effect. So when you look at the plan like that, it looks pretty scary. But in actual fact, this is what you get. Now, this is actually a swimming pool here and a swimming pool here, right? This is a swimming pool. These are all the little back alleys on the side, on the side. Now, this swimming pool is how it works is that the people from the unit itself can actually just jump into the pool itself. It means it's actually not in a big open area. It's actually like a little stream. From the unit itself, when they're cooking, the kids can actually just jump in the pool and have a swim. Or even when you're actually doing a swim, you can actually smell and can hear the people living in there doing the cooking, and you can actually hear a little bit of the conversation. So basically, it's really to create a little village-like atmosphere when there's the sound of cooking, the sound of children playing in this environment. And these spaces here, for instance, they actually also open up from the kitchen. Now, before, in Singapore, we have all households usually have families. Have helpers looking after the children. So basically, this is actually where all the children and helpers will actually mingle. The helpers can socialize with each other, and the children can play here safely away from the cars. So this is how we actually create this kind of village-like environment. This is another view of the swimming pool. All right. Now, the materials used are actually very, very economical, somewhat cheap materials. These are actually $2 tiles from Malaysia, clinker tiles. Nobody wants them. They are like the little long, short strips of tiles. But to me, they are quite beautiful, brick color. And all we did was actually chose all the different colors and just mix them all up. And to me, it creates a very, very warm kind of paving. And this is actually just a rough plaster. Now, in Walton Estate, quite some time back, when we actually built all this mess, the housing estate, the main finish was actually a rough plaster. What they do is actually just sputter the plaster onto the wall, and that's all. But it used to be very sharp. So when children run by, they actually get scratched all the time. So because I was actually building in Walton Estate, so I used the same kind of sort of technique for the plastering. But what I did was actually, after I made the sputter finish, I pressed it down. I asked the contractor to press it down so that it's slightly flatter. But it is still somewhat like the rough sputter finish that I'm after. But what it does is it gives it a very, very nice texture, and it's very, very cheap to do, you see. So this is how actually we did this. The wood, sorry, I forgot to mention the wood. The wood here is actually all recycled wood that we actually got from Malaysia. And we cladded the building, all the units with this wood. Hopefully people will actually, from the terraces, actually they will grow some plants and climb, so that they'll climb over the whole trellises. At the same time, we also keep the concrete roof cool. All the air conditioning is actually all up here. So this is actually a Walton Estate, an amalgamation of all the sunset houses that we talked about. This house at Linden Drive, I actually wanted just to show it mainly because it's actually also the kampong attached house concept. But I wanted to show this picture mainly because for you to understand how the section of these tropical houses work. Mainly because there's a big roof that shelters the intermediate level, the intermediate level that shelters the lowest level. So the section actually works this way. And if you think about it, actually all these tropical houses, actually that's how it works. The section is like that. It's always the bigger one sheltering the lower one, and the lower one sheltering the inner sanctum. And even in the shop houses, you think there is no such thing, but you look at it, there is actually such a phenomenon going on. The roof overhang all the rain drips, and then the rain drips into the pilasters and then into the window. So there is always this staggering of the outer layer to the inner layer to keep the windows as far away from the rain and the sun as possible. Right. So I wouldn't go into too much detail of this house. I mean, it's the same thing. They're all in columns, and it's just a square, right? This is number 19 Sunset Place. This is one of those houses that we were told to keep the existing house. Now, this house was, when the owner came to us, the owner wanted to keep this house mainly because she grew up in this area. As a child, she grew up in this area. But now she's grown up and she's married with 2 young children. And she basically bought this house and wanted to move back in. But of course now the space requirements, the existing house is too small for to fit in all the new requirements. So when she came to us, she asked us, can you do something? But keep the house because for sentimental reasons. So I said, I'll take a look at the house and then we'll discuss more. So when we went in, discovered that they had all these huge, long timber strips. The timber strips were 3 meters long. Now it's almost impossible to get that kind of length of timber nowadays in Singapore. In Singapore, when we talk about timber strips, it's only about 4 feet long, not 3 meters long. You know. So I said, yeah, let's keep it. And also the brick, you know, in this existing house is actually of very, very high quality. They're very, very dense. So very, very good bricks. In terms of the design, it wasn't spectacular, but the materials that are actually inside the house are actually quite good. So I said, okay, let's try and salvage it and keep this. So when we actually designed a house to satisfy the space requirements, now I could always actually just add on to a separate wing to the house, and would have satisfied all the requirements. But the thing is, I thought that if I actually add a separate wing, I would have killed off the whole garden, which wouldn't be too nice because the owners are actually garden-loving people so they actually wanted to keep as much of the garden as possible. So in the end, I told them, why don't I just build, after studying all their space requirements, I said, why don't we just expand radially? That means I built a concrete shell over your existing brick house. You know, by expanding radially, I would have satisfied all your space requirements. So I don't actually have to build a separate wing altogether to take care of your space requirements and then kill off all your garden at the same time. So that was the strategy for this house, right? Now, if you look at this existing house, if you look at all the previous windows, they're all very, very small, right? So not very, very tropical because inside it will be very dark and ventilation wouldn't be too good. So, but when I covered the brick part of the house with the concrete part, then I'm able to actually open up all the windows for the existing house. So now we have actually made the house sort of a tropical house, because with the patio spaces and whatsoever, the outer layer, concrete layer, would have protected the inner layer from the sun and the rain. And then I can then actually open up all the windows a lot bigger, right? And then when it rains and I don't have to scramble and close up all the windows I normally do nowadays, you see. So, but of course, all these spaces that are expanded really are not just patio spaces. Some of them are actually bathrooms, and some of them are actually just a little courtyards from the library, right? So, because all these spaces can actually afford to be a bit wet, so even if they serve a purpose to shelter the inner sanctum, but at the same time it has its own use too. So that's how we actually made the brick house tropical. And the other thing is this. The other thing I want to talk about is, where is this? Okay. Now, when we actually, when we actually covered the brick house with the concrete shell, we have all these very big windows. On on the outer layer and on the inner layer. But we never lined up all the big windows, mainly because, in Singapore, all the houses are very close to each other. Your neighbor is practically looking at with a 2 meter and a 2 meter setback is basically just a 4 meter setback, and we're practically looking into your bedroom if you're not careful. So even though we actually do all these very big windows, what we did was we actually stagger all the windows. Now, when we actually stagger the windows, there's a subset where you can actually look straight out, but most of the time, only when you actually look at an angle, then you can actually see a lot more. But when you actually look in the front, you can't see right through. When we actually do this, we actually took care of the privacy issue without compromising on the light and air, because the windows are still very big, and we still get a lot of air, and we still get a lot of reflected light. But the privacy of the house is actually kept. You see, so that's what we did for this house. Now the thing is, I just talk a little bit about the look of the house. When people look at the house, in fact, the client, even though we briefed the client about the house is going to look like this. Now, the formwork actually is a recycled formwork from a few doors away. Now, for budget reasons, we wanted to do something special, and also because for budget reasons, we can't just do it out of fresh concrete, fresh formwork. We actually had to buy a recycled formwork to do something like this, right? So, but I told the client that eventually it will look a bit dirty and a bit grungy. Don't expect it to be perfectly immaculate and clean and like most of the Singapore houses. So whether they can actually take it or not. So they said, yeah, we can take it. But actually, when you strike the concrete, they were quite horrified. So, so we drove down there. But what I told them is that you can't look at it in isolation. Basically, a lot of houses that we do, the reason why is a bit dirty and a bit dark, and it's the idea that the landscape and the house should actually become one eventually, so that you don't have to spend so much time worrying about whether it's going to be mossy or a bit streaky and whatsoever. But when the plants and the trees grow, when they grow all over the house, then this whole thing will look like one big garden shed. You see. No, I always also tell people that when you go to Bali, you look at one of the resorts, but when it's brand new, when you look at the resort, it's actually pretty scary because it's all built out of this sandstone and it's immaculately clean, and it's horrific. It's only beautiful after like a few months when the trees and everything have grown over it and the moss has grown over it, and that's when it becomes beautiful. But when you try and clean it up, it looks terrible. So let our houses be part of the landscape, and don't worry too much about it. Only when you actually enter the house, then you can keep it as clean as you want. You see. So that's what we talk to the clients about. The next house is Lermit Road. Lermit Road, again, this is the existing house. Lermit Road is actually just next to the Botanical Gardens. Now, when you look at this house, because the owner of the house is a very old lady, she inherited the house from the father. And she said, I want to keep this house because it's from my father. I went to look at the house looks terrible. It's not spectacular at all. It's one of those 70s mass-produced kind of house. So what am I going to do? It's like, but she was quite insistent that she wants to keep it. So I guess you can't argue with emotion. Sometimes it's this kind of thing. So I said, okay, let me take a look at it and see what we can do. Now, if you're familiar with Singapore and Lermit Road and Cluny Road, Botanic Gardens is here. This is our site. This is Lermit Road, and this is Cluny Road. Cluny Road is used as a shortcut between Holland Road and Bukit Timah Road. Now, this road is used by vehicles day and night. There are lots of vehicles going up and down the whole day and night. So, when you stand at the house, and you look up, you get totally stressed because the cars are zooming by whole day long. And then at night is actually a double whammy because all the headlights will be on. So the headlights will all be flashing by you. And so if you're standing at the house and looking out and then trying to have the party, you just imagine it's not a very nice environment to be in. So, and Lermit Road is also used as a shortcut between Nasim and Cluny. So quite a lot of vehicular movement around here. So in the end, what I told the client was that, okay, since I can't tear down your house and reorient it and redo the whole house, I have to build a wall around the house. Basically, this is the wall. It's like the Great Wall of China kind of thing. Basically, the strategy is just to recreate an environment inside so that we can reorient all the windows and the doors to open up into this environment. So that now it's a controlled environment. It's not an environment where you look straight up into the road and all the cars zooming by. So with that strategy, then we built this wall around it, and then create a little courtyard inside. So now, if you look at the house now, all the windows on the side, I close up everything and just move all the windows to face inside the internal courtyard. So the internal courtyard is here. Now this is all still quite new, so it's not really mature yet, the garden. But now if you go there now, all the plants are climbing all over the wall. So the brick and the plant, to me, are still somewhat compatible. So this is what is happening in this house, right? So this house here, okay, I should move one. It's actually, okay, this is the size of the land. It's a huge piece of land. Originally, the client wants to subdivide the land into 4 plots. 3 plots for the daughter and 1 plot for himself to stay in. This is a tennis court. Huh? This is how big. So now, because it's actually built. Oh, sorry. This is actually built next to a sort of a black and white house. So in this house, what I've done is actually I just took the imagery of the black and white house and sort of distilled the imagery of the black and white house and make it into his extension. That's why you see the shape is like that. It's a big roof with internal courtyards, with verandas and deep set windows and dormer windows. Now, that's how it actually came about. Then the other reason why this whole house is actually built of concrete is mainly because for the simple fact that the owner is actually a concrete supplier. So yeah, so I mean this is very cheap to him. This car costs twice as much as this house. So it's actually it's a Ferrari, by the way. So it's meaningless. But if you look at this house, actually, these are all the little skylights that we did. Now in Singapore, most people tend to do skylights at the big skylights, but to me that is not very sensible because our heat is way too great, and the long wavelength that comes in will kill you. So if you ever do skylights, I always do skylights that are very, very tiny, and this skylight is only about 300 squares. But we have a bit more because basically this is actually a water feature, and then there will be plants. And now there are plants now, but we haven't planted it here. The plants will be growing out of this wall. So this light is actually necessary for the plant, right? And if you look at all these little black holes are actually little chimneys. And basically, I mean, it's a simple technology that we use in all our old houses. By simple convection, when the hot air rises, when it rises to the top, if you actually allow a little space, a little gap for this hot air to escape, the whole house will be a lot cooler. But if you don't, the hot air will be trapped here, and the build-up gets bigger and bigger, and it becomes tremendously hot. It's a very simple technology that we use in our old shop houses, our old kampong houses, and you can actually just use all these little things and take care of it, right? And even this space here, if you look at all these little gaps are actually air gaps. There are little fans behind that excuse me, that blow over the water feature, and then they actually help to cool the house down. So these are little things that we actually do in our little houses. No high and mighty fancy technology. We just use very, very basic, simple technologies to take care of all these things. And yeah, so this deep set windows I was talking about, you know, enjoying the profile, the high ceilings and what have you, big verandas, right? So this is actually like an internal courtyard that is the bathroom actually looks into the internal courtyard. The view from the other way around, right? So this is my version of a little version of a black and white house, but a stylized version of it. What to say about this house? This house is actually, I mean, it's a little bit like that Leiden Road house, concrete house, but done in timber and a lot bigger. This house is actually a 9,000 square feet house with car parking for 9 cars below. So the scale is actually quite different, but the strategy is the same. So, but what I did here was actually I used a sort of a timber screen all around. The balcony is actually recessed. It's actually back inside. It's actually inside inside here. So the weather protection is actually set in, not on the outside, right? So that's the only difference that I explored in this house. Now the other main thing about this house is actually is the triangle site. So now triangular site is actually very, very bad for the Chinese because it's very bad feng shui. The qi is very bad. I don't know whether they understand that. So for the Chinese, when they occupy a triangle site, one of the first things you've got to do is you've got to anchor the site. You've got to stabilize the site. So what I did when I did a square, the feng shui master was, oh, excellent. You know, this is the perfect solution for it. So, well, it works for me. So that's how I actually became this also. That's why you also see the main entrance is actually very, very far away because for the owner of the house, his main entrance got to be in the northeast corner. So you've got to drive and then get out of the car and then walk all the way back in. So, yeah. So this is Victoria Park. Big, huge atrium here where the skylight comes through, shine into the air well, which is this little air well that brings light into the basement also. So, right. Okay, this house I wanted to show you mainly because it's actually for my sentimental reason, because when I first started the company, it is actually my first job. Extremely low budget in Wharton Estate, and extremely low fees too. But what I'm most happy about this project is actually, if you look at it, because of the budget constraint, I packed everything into one square here, right? Bomb shelter, kitchen, maid's room, blah blah blah. Everything is all inside here. And then on top, where all the toilets are, they actually straddle this square because all the services will have to go through here, right? So, and I could still give them a very decent house with all this little, well, they have a fantastic view at the back. So this part here, this patio opens out a fantastic view, which is here, right? So the bathroom with very simple materials, open out into a little outdoor shower, what have you. But the thing that I'm most happy about this house is that when I completed the house, I thought it actually fitted into the context quite well. because this is actually Wharton Estate, and all the existing houses actually look like this. So when I completed my new house, it still fitted in quite well. So accidentally, of course, actually, but I thought it was. So this was actually my first house when I first started. This project is a 6-story apartment block in Killiney Road. I don't know whether you're familiar with Killiney Road. Killiney Road is where we have all our kaya toast, traditionally, the famous kaya toast along that street. It's actually a very, very busy street. At the end of this street is Somerset, Orchard Road, right? So it is a very, this is actually a very awkward site. We're supposed to build 6 stories within this site. There's a gas station here, and there's an existing housing block on that side. Now, you know, in Singapore, when we build housing like this, I think we discussed this briefly earlier on. One of the first prerequisites about building housing is that for the developer, they don't care so much about how it looks like or whatsoever. Most important thing is that your sellable area must be there, and your non-sellable area, which is the circulation and whatsoever, must be the minimum. Because if you increase your non-sellable area, he will not let you build it because it's not economically viable for him whatsoever. So that is usually the governing criteria for when we build housing. You know, you don't have to go anywhere else with that. Just that, you know. So, and then what happens is that when you talk about a sellable efficiency and non-sellable efficiency, more often than not, what you get is you're going to get a central core. A central core in the sense that the lift comes. What it means is that the lift, the fire escape, all the service ducts are all in one central core. Basically, what you do is you come out from that core, the lift opens, you go straight into your apartment. Minimal circulation area, so minimal non-sellable efficiency. So in this case, it's also the same thing. You know, you can't get away from that. So, but when we actually did that, when we actually tried that on this site, because of the configuration of the site, the units looked terrible. It was really unbearable for me to even think about continuing with the design. So, against logic, so let's try a corridor system instead. Just to test it out, we did a corridor system instead. And to our surprise, because of the configuration of the site, somehow with the corridor system, the efficiency was actually better than the central core. So it was a lucky break in that sense, you know. So of course, when the efficiency is better, the developer will say, yes, by all means, go ahead and do it. But what it does for us is that now it allows us to create all these little courtyards in between. All these little courtyards in between. And it's so much better for the residents now, because now when you come back from the lift opens, you don't have to go straight into your apartment. You can actually walk along a little path that has all these little courtyards. That to me is a lot better, a better sense of arrival to come home to, rather than you know, open and then you just barge into your unit and then your spectacular view beyond. So that was our little breakthrough in that sense, because if we didn't do the due diligence and just explore the corridor, we would have stuck with the central core, and then wouldn't have been a pretty good project. So now, of course, now the corridor is exactly 15 meters because it's the fire running distance. If it had gone slightly further out, I wouldn't be able to do it. It's exactly a fire running distance. You know. So doing a project like this, and then to manage to create all this little courtyards. Right. So I think actually that's the last project that I want to share with you. This thing I've touched on briefly. I mean, I always like to show this, mainly because in all our projects, that's why when we talked about our projects being a bit dirty and grungy and letting it be a bit dirty, to be more symbiotic with the landscape, it's mainly because I thought that it would be so much nicer if we actually, when we fly by in the plane and we actually see this in our whole neighborhood is actually like this, compared to something like this where, you know, you fly by, you see a house, a pool, and some trees, and then another house, a pool, and another clump of trees, you know. So actually when we actually talk to the clients a lot of times, we're actually always trying to encourage them to actually, first to find out whether they are actually nature-loving people. If they are, then maybe we can actually do something like that. And then slowly, then the whole environment could actually be a bit more like this. And then don't be too preoccupied with how clean, how is it going to be. You know, in fact, the dirtier it is, the better it is. You know, because, no, I mean, joke aside, I mean, there was a time I finished one house in Ingnew Avenue, and brand new spanking white, beautiful house. And on TOP day, TOP is temporary occupation permit. That means the client can move in on that day. And all of us were standing outside looking at the beautiful house. And the bird flew by and pooped. And then hit the gable end right at the top. And then bright, nicely white house with a splat, you know. And I was like, oh, what are we going to do now? And, yeah, so the contractor had to erect scaffolding, cost $1,200 to clean off the pool, you know. It's like, why? What the heck for, you know? Just keep it dirty and be part of the landscape, you know. Anyway, that's how I tell them. That's what I tell them. But it's true. It's a true story, you know. Anyway, I don't want to overstay my welcome. That's it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks very much. I think it was a very interesting lecture, and I learned a lot about how architecture can actually contribute to kind of Singapore's landscape. I'm sure there are lots of questions now. So who wants to go ahead? Any question?
Singaporeans don't ask questions.
Kenghua.
Thank you for the very interesting lecture. Just one or two questions, just out of curiosity. What if your client is not a nature lover? How would you able to convince them? Because we did houses, and a lot of time we couldn't get through this stage of convincing them to accept this kind of materiality or appearance or aesthetics. Mm-hmm. So that was always the struggle that we have. So how do you convince those urban lovers to love nature or accept this kind of houses, accept bird shit and things like that? Second question is that most of the projects are pretty low dense, I would say. And they all comes with very strong tropical concept. Mm-hmm. What if you are taking up a very high dense development? How would you apply this kind of tropical concept into a high density, high rise environment? Just out of curiosity.
Well, actually, the first question about the non-nature lovers, actually we have a few of those. I guess you can't force things down people's throat. I mean, we are architects after all. I mean, we can only when people point us, we design to what they aspire for. We can always encourage them to have a little bit at least, because it's actually good for them also. I mean, but if they really refuse to, then there's nothing we can do. You can only urge them as best as you can. So some of them have turned around, and but some of them, I understand they're diehards. They pave everything, you know. As for high-rise buildings, I understand. Of course, it's a lot more difficult to do tropical high-rise buildings. But I mean, there are lots of. I mean, I've actually designed one which I didn't show here, but also it wasn't built. Was to actually have. At that time, it's allowable, but now it's not. But we actually have balconies all around and planter boxes around. So that is sort of you always have a transition space between the element and actually the living space itself. So there's a little bit of a transition. And most of the time you actually just do a little bit, but the trick is try and push it to the extreme. That means you have it everywhere. And then I think then it will be quite a nice space already. You know, even in KL, I also did a 10-story apartment. That was actually in 2009. At that time, the 10-story apartment, what I did was actually I had a 2-meter wide sort of a concrete canopy. Now, at that, when I suggested it, the client was like, "What the heck are you doing?" So I told them, "No, you know, if you actually have this one, then straight away your windows can be full height. Because you will have at least a 45-degree protection for your windows. And when you have the full height windows around, yes, you pay a lot more to construct it, but your value goes up a lot more, because when people look at it, it looks really exquisite and expensive, because of full height windows instead of always parapet height kind of windows. Then your commercial value actually goes up, and that's exactly what has happened by the simple. But of course, I use that as a design medium, but it's not all round, because if you do a 2-meter canopy all round, it's very expensive. But actually, for the more important areas, it's 2 meter, then it becomes a thinner one, and then becomes a smaller one, and it becomes big again. So it becomes a design feature just with the extension of the canopy, which I didn't show it here. I thought I'd just show the smaller projects today. Yeah. So it can be done. It's just a bit more difficult.
Just one other question here.
Hi. Actually, I'm just quite curious, right? You know the concrete building, the perforations. I was wondering, like, I think it's a good idea, but I was wondering how you keep rain out.
Yeah, very simple. You know, your chimney is not, of course, not a chimney that opens up and let rain come in. Your chimney it's actually made out of mild steel, and you turn, and then you have another flap. It becomes a louver. If you make it deep enough, the hot air will escape. When it rains very heavily, of course there'll be some splatter. It'll just be a drop or two. It's not as if it's all rushing in. So it's like a louver, but it's just for those people who have fireplaces, you understand. That's how you keep the rain out, right? For us, you know, the old shop houses for the toilet ventilation, the kitchen ventilation, the chimney at the back. Have you seen those? They're still around, you know. You go and see. The chimneys are for the cooking from the charcoal. When the hot air rises, it rises to the top. There's a little like a bird house at the top, and then the fins are at the side, and then actually the hot air just escapes. So it's the same principle. As long as you can keep most of the rain out, you know. Of course, when it's really storming, you get a little bit of splatter, but it should be acceptable.
Just one other question.
Okay. So for the Killiney house, right? I mean, I think it's the most like publicly visible of the buildings that you have presented today. So it's the only one I've actually seen in real life.
Okay.
So I was just wondering, like, what is the concept and like the context of the building? Because on one hand, you know, you're in that area, you have lots of shop houses, and then on the other side, you have lots of really tall condominiums. So that one seems like a middle ground kind of in terms of elevation for that building in that context. So like, and it has a very distinctive kind of facade that doesn't really fit in with the buildings next to it. Was that like a deliberate choice or anything?
Okay. Well, first of all, like I said, it's actually controlled by, you know, whenever the plot of land is given to you to design as an architect, one of the first things you're told is that the plot ratio is down there it's 3. The land is about 3,000 square feet. So you have to maximize to the maximum plot ratio. So you have to maximize the sellable area. That's it. But that plot also actually has a height control. So we actually couldn't go any higher. So we managed to go 6 stories and max the plot ratio. Right? Now, in terms of how to relate, because next to it, like I said, it's actually a shop house, and on the other side is actually a very old sort of a housing estate. So I mean, there wasn't very much I can relate to. But what I did was, let me just go back to the. What I did was, this block here has a lot of clay tiles. And if you actually look closely, I actually had clay tiles on my core. That is actually of the same color. So in terms of materiality, I tried to continue a little bit of that clay tiles on this building. There's a huge building here, a lot of these red clay tiles. So in here, I actually just use, in terms of materiality, I just continue a little bit of that. Now the fins, the what do you call them? The screen is actually a reaction to the very, very busy road in front. Because if I don't have this screen, all the living spaces will be exposed to the street, right? And also, the people here then with the screen has an option to open it up. Because these are all movable, you can open it up and enjoy the street and be more direct contact with the street. But if not, then you just close it up. And people can't really see you until they are standing directly in front of your apartment. So that's all the relation I can get. I understand where you're coming from. I also can't deal with the scale. See, the shop house is here, this side, right? So, yeah. I hope that helps a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Any other question?
Hi. Hi. Thank you for your talk. I'm here. Hi. Can I ask? How do you think do you think that the way you design and the way you make buildings has changed with technology and computation and stuff?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Do you think that the way you design buildings and make buildings has changed with computation and technology?
Has changed due to
yeah, technological advancements. Do you think technological advancements has changed the way you design?
I am one of the most low-tech person on earth. So, I mean, I don't think so. I must admit, to tell the truth, actually, I'm sitting on I was telling some of the people here I was talking to earlier on, I sit on the HDB design panel, and recently I actually attended a design crate where they talked about designing a sort of precinct next to the Pongo, next in front of the sea. So, and they presented a lot of simulations, sun simulation, wind simulation, all those simulation about where the sun path is and blah, blah, blah. You get all these things. Fantastic, a lot of studies done. And then after the end of the study, this is how the building looks like. Then I looked at it, then I said, well, basically it's just big roof with a lot of fins on the side, with a lot of fins on the side. And then they say, when the northeast and the southwest monsoon blows on this side, this is only this amount of rain you get. When you blow from this side, this amount of rain you get, and it's all proven scientifically. Well, my answer to that is that yes, believe in it. I think by all means study all those things and make sure you you cover as much ground as possible. But you should trust a little bit of your instincts and your intuition also, because all this technology is only as good as as to what kind of parameters you set. Because if your parameters changes a little bit, the whole thing goes haywire. And then now, if you look at the precinct, the blocks are all like that. When you do the study, there are no blocks around. Then when the blocks are there, they will interfere with your wind and interfere with your funneling. So it changes quite a bit. So the ideas are great, you know. So and then the backing with the scientific proving is great. But if you don't use your intuition and intelligence to question it a bit further to make it better, and you can actually make it spectacular. But if you just trust everything to that, and then if it fails, you're going to fail spectacularly, you know. So be very, very. I think by all means, whatever you're comfortable with, use whatever you can. But you still got to look at it and evaluate with your how should I say it, everyday common sense lah, you know.
Any other question?
Point of view, you know.
Maybe one more question. If not, I'm going to ask myself. I ask myself. I was when I was looking at your projects, I was quite amazed by the quality of finishing and detailing, actually. Mm-hmm. And having been on site myself, I kind of wonder, I mean, are you living on the construction site to push the workers to achieve that? Or what is your strategy to really get stuff done to such a high quality, actually?
Well, actually, no, you know, I actually believe in the idea that the best details are the simple details. And you don't have to, if you can touch your nose this way, why don't you just touch your nose instead of going the other way around and touch your nose. So it's the same thing with detailing. I find that if the simple detail solves everything, just use the simple detail. And it's understandable and most people can actually comprehend it. So that is actually how I always advocate. And then that's what I try to talk to my people about, you know. Then the other thing is also, it's like when you detail something, sometimes you also got to understand the level of sophistication of the people doing it. You know, if you're a German contractor or a Japanese contractor, you do form work in a certain way, and you expect a certain kind of finish. But you try and do that kind of finish in the Singapore context, you're going to tear your hair out if you have hair, you know what I mean? But you have to understand that what you want, you not be able to get whatever you want. So you could understand the sophistication. So if my contractors are, you know, sometimes one project, the owner has a little bit more budget, you can actually afford a better contractor. And yes, then you can test a lot more things. You can actually experiment, and the guy is game, and you sometimes turn up quite interesting finishing. But if there's no budget, and the contractor is like, he hardly understands your drawing, then please don't try and detail something and expect him to execute it. It's impossible. So you got to understand basically you understand the rules and you play the game in the rules. Yeah. So that's how I approach it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. If there's no other question, I would just say let's raise our hands again and say thank you.
Thank you.